Greetings everyone, TA here with a new video where we go over the story, interactions, might, and personality of different Fire Emblem characters. Wait. Today, we will be discussing the Defense King, the Swift and Gentle Knight, and the maybe baby daddy of the Binding Blade's favorite early game archer. That's right, today, we will be discussing Lowen. Anyway, that's enough of that. Let's get into it. On the outskirts of Foray, Lowen was born to peasants in a small village that had very little to offer in terms of resources and was very far from Castle Foray. This, however, did not stop the knights from protecting the village when it came under attack from bandits. Inspired by their valor and honor, Lowen swore that he would one day become a knight himself. Shortly after the attack, Lowen and his father traveled to the castle, where Lowen began his training as a squire, and his father became the chef for the previous Marquis, Eliwood's grandfather, and later Elbert. When Lowen was not conducting his squirely duties, he was in the kitchen with his father, and gained his tenacity for food by doing so. Despite Lowen becoming a knight and a soldier, Lowen followed his father's example and ensured that Eliwood was well fed and taken care of. One of Lowen's favorite sayings when it came to food is, "If the stomach is empty, empty too lies the heart." One day, however, Lowen was chosen by Marcus to go with him and Eliwood to find Eliwood's father. During the expedition, he encountered a village being attacked by bandits while searching for able-bodied men. It was here that Lowen and the others rescued the archer Rebecca, who can influence the ending for the chivalrous knight. Mark was also rescued during this time and went on to become the most well-written avatar in any Fire Emblem game. Following the battle, Lowen continued to fight for Eliwood under Marcus's command, and later, after the war, he returned to Foray to become one of Foray's most decorated knights, and continued his knightly duties for the rest of his days. Lowen comes with what is possibly the best affinity in the game, Fire. When progressed to A rank, the Fire affinity provides a 1.5 to attack, a 7.5 to accuracy, 7.5 to avoid, and 7.5 to critical. These are stats that are really good for Lowen, whose strength primarily resides in his remarkably high HP and luck, and can make him a much more viable unit when paired with the right partner. Lowen does have a few supports with Eliwood, Isadora, Marcus, Harken, and the one that can affect his ending, Rebecca. Because of how supports work in GBA games, you do need to be careful on who you support with if you want to get the most out of it, both in terms of gameplay and story. In Lowen's support with Eliwood, Lowen's love for cooking and his dedication to his lord becomes apparent. Throughout their conversations, Lowen does everything in his power to ensure that Eliwood is properly fed, and panics when he oversleeps and doesn't make Eliwood his breakfast. No matter how much Eliwood tries to assuage his fears, Lowen continues to make sure that he eats the most important meal of the day. It isn't until the A support, where Eliwood realizes that Lowen has been the one that was preparing his meals, and Lowen reveals to Eliwood that part of the reason he has been so adamant on him eating was because Eleanor and Marcus became worried that he might not be eating enough. Eliwood since promised to eat all of his food whether he was hungry or not. Eliwood comes with the Anima affinity, which when combined with Lowen's Fire affinity, grants him a +3 to attack, 1.5 to defense, 7.5 to accuracy, 15 avoid, and 7.5 to crit. Story-wise, I like to picture the reason Eliwood is finally able to get some more attack is because Lowen's breakfast has huge amounts of protein, so Eliwood can get those sweet gains. Lowen does have a decently high defense already, so that works more in Eliwood's favor, but overall, it is a solid choice to help out both of these somewhat noodle-armed units. Lowen interacts with Isadora in much the same way as he does with Eliwood. always ensuring that he is respectful of her title and constantly makes sure that she has enough food. He goes so far in it that Isadora even asks him how he was able to make it back from Foray when he stops to have a picnic during every battle. She even continues in a later support that she doesn't think that it is proper for a knight to eat in the middle of battle, fearing Marcus's scolding. The support ends with a fairly wholesome ending, with the two reaffirming their duties as Knights of Foray and solidifying their friendship. Isadora's Dark Affinity does grant Lowen some nice bonuses with a combined 15 accuracy, 15 avoid, 15 crit, and 7.5 dodge. While Lowen's decent defense and high HP does not benefit super greatly from it, the added crit does help his mediocre offensive stats. The bonuses from the support does help Isadora immensely more than Lowen by allowing Isadora to become even more of a dodge tank, which is her primary use. Overall, this support does focus more on the friendship between the two and not so much on the stats gained between them. However, if you're in it for the story, you really can't get much better than the interaction between fellow knights and those who see each other as equals. Marcus's support with Lowen is fairly typical of a mentor-mentee dynamic, especially one that is so engrossed in the military. Marcus pushes Lowen as hard as he can since he clearly sees the huge amount of potential that Lowen has. He does put Lowen's well-being in danger at times, especially during their B support conversation, and knocks him off of his horse again and again and again. Marcus does not relent in his training of Lowen until they reach their A support, and recognizes the effort and work Lowen has put in and ensures his knighthood when they return to Castle Foray. We did almost make it through an entire support without Lowen bringing up food, but alas, Lowen provides Marcus with some boar meat dumplings, which just sound delicious, and Marcus provides Lowen with some words of wisdom. Fill your heart, but first, fill your belly. Which sounds very similar to what Lowen says to Eliwood. Marcus comes with the Ice Affinity, which is much more defense oriented and is likely better on some of the more fragile units. When these two reach their A support, Marcus and Lowen gain a 1.5 to attack, 1.5 to defense, 15 to accuracy, 7.5 to avoid, 7.5 to crit, and 7.5 to dodge. Personally, I wouldn't go for the A support here, but it definitely wouldn't hurt to put a little bit into it. The conversations between them does show that despite Marcus's rough demeanor, all he wants is for his subordinates to become the best that they can be and to eventually replace him. The final two supports both have the same affinity, Fire. Being able to double up on the Fire affinity for Lowen helps him immensely by providing a +3 to attack, a 15 to accuracy, 15 to avoid, and a 15 to crit. Since GBA games do limit the amount of supports you can gain by 5, going for these two may be the best option for Lowen in order to boost his offensive capabilities while still giving him some assistance in a couple of weak areas that he has. With Harken, it becomes clear very quickly that Lowen looks up to him more than he does any other knight, including General Marcus. Harken is a bit disheartened during their first interaction, with the Knights of Foray being weakened, and at his own failure of protecting Eliwood's father, Lord Elbert. This disheartening feeling from Harken bleeds into their B support, where Harken does everything he can to tell Lowen never to look up to him because of his failure. It was here though that Harken's demeanor began to change, when Lowen informed Harken of how he decided to become a knight. It wasn't stated outright, but it is heavily implied that Harken was one of the knights that Lowen saw defend his village that caused him to take up the lance and join the Knights of Foray. Now, it is time for Lowen's most important support partner, Rebecca. As stated previously, when Lowen attains the A support with Rebecca, the ending for him changes and he becomes the father of the green-haired FE6 archer, Volt. Their support begins with a bit of hero worship from Rebecca as she thanks Lowen for saving her and her village, while Lowen tries to bring her back to the reality of what happened. She does embellish a little bit of what happened, even changing the color of Lowen's horse, because that is how she prefers remembering it. Later on, Rebecca does bring Lowen some additional rations to help supplement his stores. The support ends with Lowen doting over Rebecca, afraid for her safety because of his feelings for her, and because of a premonition. This premonition, however, turned out to just be a stomach rumbling, but it was sweet nevertheless, and they spent the rest of their days together, in the service of Lord Eliwood and Foray. Lowen's starting stats are fairly decent, with higher HP, defense, and constitution than Sane and Kent at the same level. This, however, is where Lowen's ability to be used gets a little muddled. If Lynn's story is skipped, Lowen can easily take the place of one of these two if need be. However, if Lynn's story is played, Lowen does not gain any additional levels and will most likely be benched because of it. Additionally, Lowen has really good growth in HP and luck, and a decent defense growth, but is mediocre in every other area with only having a 30%. He does have the highest constitution out of the Cavaliers, allowing him to use steel swords and silver lances without being weighed down, but since he has such a high chance of getting speed screwed, it is possible that it won't matter in the long run. Depending on the routes as well, Lowen's starting equipment does change. In Eliwood's story, he begins with an iron sword and a javelin at the start of chapter 11, making him a lot more versatile right out of the gate. During Hector's story, however, he comes with an iron lance instead of a javelin, meaning that you would need to give him one before he can start attacking at 2 range, which, while not a big deal, can turn some people off from him in favor of those who can already attack from 2 range. Lowen does promote into the Paladin class, which does grant him some much needed bonuses in attack power and constitution, allowing him to use hand axes and brave swords without being weighed down. Unlike the other Cavaliers, Lowen is definitely defense focused as opposed to offense, which could definitely be used to your advantage, but it does make him a little bit harder to level up since he will need to be fed kills. If you like Armor Knights and want one that can actually keep up, you could not do any better than Lowen. Overall, Lowen is a very gentle person who is obsessed with ensuring that his friends, especially Lord Eliwood, are well fed. Because Lowen was both birthed and raised in poverty, he became obsessed with ensuring that he stays full and constantly carries emergency rations on him to make sure he does not miss a meal and pass out. Hold up, this sounds familiar. Well, anyway, this obsession with ensuring he has food available to him does extend to his comrades. Or at least it does until Harken forces him to give all of his rations to Merlinus and their A support together. This habit of Lowen does also get him chastised by Marcus and Isadora, but it allows him and Rebecca to grow closer together. So take that, Harken. Love triumphs in the end. Along with his gentle demeanor, Lowen does also have some insecurities which show during his supports with everyone when he constantly stumbles on his words, especially with those of a higher station than him. This insecurity is most likely because of how and where he was born, believing that he is not as deserving as those that are above him, despite his talents in both cooking and swordplay. He does not let it keep him down, with his tenacity and determination breaking through at times, especially when he spars with Lord Marcus. As a combat unit, I would put Lowen at 3 stars. His offensive capabilities do drag him down, but with the right supports, especially with Harken and Rebecca, it can be offset slightly. His ability to take hits and his heightened luck does push him up a bit, however, with being comparable to the defensive capabilities of Hector and Oswin, just with the ability to move farther if he needs to. Additionally, with his promotion and gaining axes, he does gain access to the entire weapon triangle, which can help his mediocre offense and hyper defense. The issue though is that getting him to promotion level does take a bit more work since he won't be able to double often. At first look, Lowen seems to be a bit of a flat character without a lot going on outside of cooking and knighthood, but as I dive deeper into who he was as a person, he would definitely be a person that you would want as a close and trusted friend. With this, I would rate his personality and story at about 3.5 stars. Now, that might seem a little high, and normally I would have agreed with you, but his writing did make me think that he was the friend that you could trust unequivocally, and he would always have your best interests at heart, which gave him that extra boost. Overall, I would put him at a 3.5 star unit. While his offensive stats do drag him down quite a bit, his survivability, potential to manipulate the weapon triangle, and his likability do keep him from dropping down to the 3-star range for me, but you could tell me that's what you think and I wouldn't really fight you on it. It ultimately comes down to personal preference, and the only pitfall is not using a character you want to use because they are not optimal, which goes against the spirit of Fire Emblem having unique characters. Fighting for that bad unit you like to stay alive is way more satisfying than using only good units which you don't have fun using. Anyway, I'll step off my soapbox for now, and thank you all so much for watching the latest installment of the SIMP series. If you enjoyed this video, please hit those like and subscribe buttons. Also, please comment down below on who you would like to see in future videos. And as always, I hope you all have a great rest of your night, and I look forward to seeing y'all tomorrow. See ya.